Hey guys, welcome to Thursday's lecture. So today we're going to be talking about your thesis and your argument structure. Not everything listed on this agenda is going to apply to the lecture portion, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So this video I want you to watch on your own. It's listed as part of your homework, and it does a really good job of introducing what an argument is and just like basic things that will help you better understand this assignment. So let's talk about the thesis and argument structure. So your thesis has to be debatable. We talked about this on Tuesday's lecture. Can someone disagree with your thesis or claim? The answer to that should be yes, if you're doing the assignment correctly. Also, the general structure is that you'll have a thesis and then you'll have reasons and evidence to support that claim. Now, these should logically support your claim so that your reader says, oh, that makes sense, and they should also emotionally appeal to your stakeholder audience and their values, needs, and knowledge on the issue. So that does require some research on your part. You need to make sure that you know who this audience that you've chosen is and what is going to get them to sway your way if they don't already agree with what you're asking them to believe, or what you're asking them to do. So let's talk about some things that would help you have a powerful thesis. You want to make sure that you're making assertions instead of asking questions. You already asked a question when you were doing your research. That's why we had those inquiry questions, but now it's time for you to answer it, because in theory, your research has been guiding you towards making a decision on this topic all along. So now you've already decided what you believe, and you want to make sure that your reader knows that you are asserting this is true. Avoid the so statements. A so statement is something that prompts readers to ask, so what's the point? And this can happen if your thesis is not debatable or if you haven't provided an indication of why your reader should care. So you may want to add some of your reasons to your thesis statement. Don't write a purpose statement. The purpose of this paper is to blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. It doesn't really lend itself well to an academic audience, and quite frankly, it's boring. I would tune out in the beginning of that sentence. Instead, make sure to write a hook that really draws your reader in, or in something that's assertive with the claim that it's making. So in this case, the example is the death penalty should be abolished because it is unfairly applied across racial and social classes. So it includes some of the reasons and it includes a claim, and that makes it a really strong thesis. So let's talk about more ways to make that powerful. You want to be specific. So don't say just raising tuition is wrong. Don't say raising tuition affects students. Say raising tuition has negative impacts on students as well as on the economy and should therefore be controlled. Like, how much more powerful is that? It sounds like this person really knows what they're talking about and that they can back it up too. So that's what you want to sound like. And it's always a good idea if your thesis identifies the stakeholder, especially if you're asking them to take action. So don't say something like, we should implement stricter policies. Say who? Who are you talking about? So in this instance, the USDA should implement stricter regulations to control how farm animals are treated during their lives and when slaughtered. So that's so specific. And that's the kind of thing you want to have. You want to have a claim that's assertive and specific, identifies the reasons and the audience if possible. So I want you guys to take out that claim worksheet that you all submitted on Tuesday for homework. And now I want you to take a look at it and think about the thesis that you wrote down. Is this thesis debatable? Is there two sides to the issue that people are arguing on? And can you identify an audience that you would be targeting that thesis to? And is it something that's important? Is your reader going to be left wondering, so what, when they read it? Or are they going to be like, gosh, that's true, that's so important? So keep all of those things in mind and make any revisions necessary to your worksheet if you think that they're needed, because ultimately this is going to guide your argument paper, and it's going to make a huge difference in how successful or, on the other hand, unsuccessful this research argument will be. So let's talk about the argument structure. We took a look at this last time, and I just wanted to review it a little bit. You should start with your thesis. Your thesis is going to be the map that guides everything else in your essay. And then you build your reasons off of that thesis, supporting each one with evidence and claims and statistics and examples, things that illustrate and support that reason. Now, when you're supporting your argument structure, let's take a look at how a student does this. So the thesis is the CSU administration should consider closing campus more often when it snows heavily. And the reason that the student lists is that students are more likely to become injured during this time. So this is a liability. This is something that the CSU administration, who is our audience, doesn't want to have to deal with. So if a student can provide evidence that, students really are more likely to be injured when it's snowy and icy on the road, then they're more likely to get their stakeholder to take action. So make sure that you're looking for those kinds of evidence that can support your claims. And then another piece of evidence here is that icy conditions can cause car accidents. So let's take a look at the student's second reason. Students may find it difficult to reach campus due to snowy conditions. And then they have evidence that supports that claim. So how does this apply to your argument? Well, your reasons and evidence should match your audience's values and needs. Just like in this example here, the CSU administration cares about these things because they care about their students' success, and if they can't make it to class, then they won't succeed. And they care about students becoming injured because it's a liability, and if students get injured, then they lose money. It's an institution, right? So bringing it back to your audience and their values and their needs. So an example of this is you wouldn't try to sell a rich businessman on donuts using the reason that they're cheap. It's not going to sell as well because this audience may not be particularly motivated by the cheapness of donuts. Maybe you'd say something like they're the most decadent, most highly rated donuts, and that maybe they would agree with you more if you use those sorts of reasons. So don't simply restate your values if those values aren't shared by your audience. And if you have time, take a look at this little short video here. It talks about ways that you sell things to people who may not think that they need them, how you can convince them that they need them. And this applies to your argument because you essentially have to convince someone that they need to agree with you. So another thing we want to talk about is logical fallacies. So logical fallacies are something that make your argument weak, and there's different kinds of them. They manipulate your reader's emotions, they misrepresent someone's character or distort an argument's logic by breaking down the connection between the thesis, reason, and evidence, or they can be unintentional or unintentional, but ultimately they weaken your argument. So this is a really good video to watch. I definitely want to make sure you guys watch this. It's listed under your homework, but I'll skip over it for now. And the first logical fallacy is ad hominem. So this is an irrelevant or distracting point. An example is listed here. And what it basically is that the evidence that is listed is not relevant to the point that you're making. You're just tossing evidence in there, and this is something you want to avoid. Another one is jumping on the bandwagon. So you're essentially saying, if everybody else does this, then it must be a good thing to do, but you're not giving any actual evidence of why people are in favor of doing this. So that's another thing you want to avoid. There's also the slippery slope, which is a series of unwarranted steps and reasoning. And the example here is kind of funny. It says, we can't let them ban books with foul language because once they do that, they're going to start banning all kinds of literature and you'll never know. Next thing you know, they're going to be burning books. You want to make sure that you're making logical connections in your argument and that you're not just skipping to the worst case scenario. And then there's a straw man attack, which is defined as oversimplifying or distorting another person's argument so that it can be dismissed more easily. So basically, you're attacking the person that's making the claim and not the actual claim itself. Another one is circular reasoning. This uses a conclusion to support itself. So an example of this is Richardson is the most successful mayor the town has ever had because he's the best mayor in our town's history. Well, this doesn't actually explain why. It's just restating that conclusion again. So make sure that you are using reasons that support your thesis and evidence that supports your reasons in order to avoid making this mistake. Another thing is stacking the deck. So this is when you present evidence for only one side of an argument. And you can avoid this logical fallacy by just making sure that you address that counter argument in the argument paper that you write for this class. So you fully consider the other person's perspective and you show evidence for that perspective as well, but then ultimately direct the attention to why your reader, your stakeholder, should still feel the way that you think they should feel. Another one is a non sequitur. So this is a statement that doesn't logically follow what has been said. So an example of this is like saying that if you buy a certain kind of Honda, it'll give you a better love life. Well, what does one thing have to do with the other, right? So another one is hastily generalization, which is coming to a conclusion without enough evidence. And an example of this is to say, college is really difficult because I have a friend that failed. Well, this doesn't actually prove that college is difficult. It could just be that your friend isn't, devoting themselves to their studies. So make sure that to avoid this, you're using multiple pieces of evidence to support a reason and claim. Another one is a post hoc ergo. So after this, or before this, or because of this. That's what that means. And it's basically saying that since one event followed another one, the first event must have caused the second event. An example is, I won the lottery because I forgot to brush my teeth this morning. Well, there doesn't necessarily have to be any correlation between that. So for my psych majors, causation does not prove correlation, is essentially what this is saying. The last one is a faulty analogy or comparison. This is when you compare two things without fully explaining the comparison or making false comparisons. So example of this would be like someone saying that tying your shoes is just like riding a bicycle, without explaining how they're the same. So if there is some kind of correlation between these two things, you need to make sure that you're explaining how this is correlated, because they don't seem to be correlated at all. So this is just a list of all of the logical fallacies in one place with their definitions. Make sure that as you are writing this argument, you are looking through this and just making sure that you're avoiding these mistakes, because they will be detrimental to your argument. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and let me know if you have any questions. Your annotations are due on Sunday, so make sure to get those done. These are your popular media annotations. So Yeah, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to review the videos and the readings for homework, and I will catch up with you all next week. Bye bye.